Alright guys, welcome back to Photo Editing Basics. This lesson is going to be color grading. Color is one of the most important ways you can tell your story through your images. So today we're going to go over the HSL color tab and the color grading tab. So what is HSL? HSL means hue, saturation, and luminance. The hue is going to be the shade of that color. So if it's red, green, blue, yellow, etc. Saturation will be the intensity or the purity of that color, right? And then luminance is going to be how bright that color is, okay? So that's what HSL means. Now the HSL and color tab will allow you to adjust these three features in your image. You can independently target colors and adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance of those colors to give your image a different look. So let's hop into Lightroom and see how to use this. Alright, so when you come into Lightroom, obviously you'll be on the library tab like we went over in the last lesson. You're just going to go over to the develop tab, okay? And I chose this image because there's plenty of color here, as you can see. So let's go through these two tabs and let's see what they can do for us. So first we have the HSL color tab. We'll click the drop down here and you'll see this right here. Let's first go over this feature right here. So we remember this little circle right here and what it does, right? So you're gonna click that, and wherever you drag, it's gonna target that color, and then you can change the hue of those colors. So if we want to do yellow and orange, that will change the hue of that. That's what that does. I just wanted to get that out of the way. In case you guys want to use that, it's there. So up here you can select what you want to change. So right now we're on hue. If we go to the red and drag the red, you can see the strawberries turning a little pink, and on the other side they turn yellow. So we're changing the color, the hue, the shade of color of that right there. And that goes for all 8 of these. There's 8 colors on here. There's red, orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple, and magenta. So if we go over to saturation right here, this will change the saturation of those colors, okay? So red, again, we can make those strawberries punch, or we can desaturate them. So remember, the saturation increases and decreases the intensity of that color. If you ever make a bunch of changes like this and you want to go back, all you have to do is double click on the name of the color and it will reset for you. There you go. All right, and last but not least, we have luminance here. Now, like I said, luminance is how bright the color is. So watch when I drag this red up, you'll see the strawberries get a little brighter right there, and you can darken it as well. And now the last one here, we have all. Now this will bring up basically all 3 of these in one little view here, and you can adjust them at the same time. Now that is the HSL tab, okay? So now let's go to the color tab. Now the color tab is basically the HSL tab, but individual colors with individual sliders. So instead of having to say, okay, I want to target my red, so let's change that and change that and change that. Instead, you can just go to the color tab and look at the red. You have the hue, saturation, and luminance here. So you can change all that if you want to target a color specifically without looking at all of this stuff here. So this is a really good view. Also, this is all colors. You can do this right here and it'll select the individual colors you select at the top here. So as you can see, there's nothing much to the HSL color tab. Super simple to use. All you're doing is shifting the way the colors look and appear on your image. Cool? Awesome. Now let's go to the color grading tab. First, let's see up here. This is what's called the 3-way. And basically this will display a color wheel for your midtones, your shadows, and your highlights. If you want to view them individually, which I suggest that you do because it's easier to make fine adjustments when it's like this. It's a little bit bigger. So the first one up here is your shadows, the second one is your midtones, and the last one is your highlights. Now this last one here is your global, so this will adjust everything. So these color wheels were made to shift colors in a certain part of the image. That's why they have them labeled as midtones, shadows, and highlights. So if we go to the midtones and we want the colors to change only in the midtones and not the shadows and the highlights, we would drag this color wheel around and you can see how drastic those effects are. So pushing and pulling on this knob around this little color wheel will increase or decrease the hue and saturation in those parts of the images you're targeting, which is right here, the midtones. If you want to increase and decrease the luminance, this little slider down here will do that for you. You can see as I drag this around, plus 100, negative 100, okay? So that increases how bright all the colors are, but in this case, how bright all the mid-tone colors are. Now, when we go to the individual color wheels, they have the luminance bar here at the bottom. Now, the hue and saturation is just hidden. You click this little drop down here, and boom, now you can have control over your hue and saturation. So the way this works is you're gonna drag this hue bar up, right? And you're gonna see this gray little circle floating around the color wheel. And this is gonna tell the little knob in the middle which way to go once you start sliding up the saturation. So you'll see the knob heads in that direction, and that goes for the midtones and the highlights. Same technique, drop down, slide the hue up, saturation will go in that direction. Cool. Two more things we gotta talk about, the blending and the balance modes here. So the blending slider will control how the colors overlap between the shadows and the highlights. Any changes you make to these three here, it will appear in the three-way. So you see all that right there, cool. So if we drag this blending slider to the left, it will reduce the colors overlapping in the shadows and the highlights. So you see now it's a little even, and now it's uneven because it just brings those two together. And as you can see, when I drag this blending slider to the right, the colors separate even more than before. Now the balance slider simply balances the effect of the color in the shadows and the highlights. I'll show you. When I drag it to the left, the effect will be more strong in the shadows, and when I drag it to the right, the effect will take hold in the highlights. Now the blending and balance sliders are a global effect. It does not affect these individual color wheels. So that is the basics to the color grading tabs. This is sort of like a trial and error type of thing. You really got to go in there and play around with the color to see what works for you and see what you like in your photos. So once you find something you like, use our class project, which is creating your own preset, to save a reference file that you can always revert back to when you start editing again. So guys, I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot this lesson, and let's move on to the next one, shall we?